Welcome to another episode of What's at Stake, a Penta podcast. I'm Bryan DeAngelis, your host and a partner here at Penta, and today I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Kevin Madden, a senior partner at Penta, and Oliver Edelmann, one of our directors who also heads up our work on the Economic Sentiment Index. Kevin, Oliver, thanks for joining the show today.
Hey, Ron. Great to be here.
We're going to jump in. We're about a year from the 2024 election, a year and change. President Biden has been out touring the U.S. talking about his economic record. The administration has started to brand it, or maybe we'll discuss who else branded it, Bidenomics, and really making this a focal point of his reelection strategy. There's been a lot of debate around the office on this. Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Is this going to work? And I thought it was a good idea to pull you guys in, especially given your expertise, and let's get into it on how voters will either embrace or reject this strategy, where the support will come from, and kind of where he goes from here with it. We're still about, like I said, 15 months or so. So, Kevin, I'm going to start with you. I'd just love to hear your thoughts. I view this as kind of a branding exercise. Some people have kind of already started to say it's an economic theory. Where do you fall on what they're actually doing here?
Well, look, I want to be very clinical about this. I don't want to be critical because I think on one hand, I take issue with it, the idea of it as a smart branding play, and then on the other hand, I understand why they're doing it, right? Yeah. So, like, let me take a glance at why I think it's a bad branding idea. I think one of the problems that you have when you sort of personalize it. This is, by the way, it feels like it is a product of some very bored staffers who are lacking creativity, right? Very Washington thing to do is add whatever the principal's name is to the policy, Reaganomics, Obamacare, Biden, now Bidenomics, right? Or if it's a scandal, just add the term gate to the end of it, right? Like it seems like just such a reflexive play. But I think also there's a lot of peril in that anytime you really add somebody's name to it, you sort of personalize it in a way that becomes problematic. Like it becomes too attached to the individual in a very partisan time. So a lot of people are going to be reflexively recoil at the idea of Bidenomics because it makes it all about Joe Biden. When in reality, I think what they have to do to explain the complexities of the economy and also where they think they can maybe generate some enthusiasm around the economy, it has to be less about one person. It has to be more about what's actually taking place in the economy, like this dramatic transformation in a pre-COVID era, the changing manufacturing sector, the changing dynamics that we have with allies and trading partners around the globe, things like that. Now, to the other point, which is like, why are they doing it? Because, they need to sort of boost Biden's profile at a time where individual parts of the economy, people feel sort of favorably about, right? They feel like, okay, there's lower unemployment. We've had a huge investment from the Inflation Reduction Act. Like individual parts of the Biden economic agenda poll really well, but the president's not getting credit for it. So how do they do that? And so they've fallen upon the idea of Bidenomics.
Yeah.
One of the other problems on this is that if you're going to really have an effective branding exercise, you have to have discipline from the principal, Joe Biden, all the way down to like the congressional candidate who's going to say, I believe in Bidenomics, to the volunteer who's knocking on doors in 2024 saying, here is why Bidenomics is working for you. And I don't think you have that right now. Even the president came out during the first 2 weeks when they were trying to roll out this brand and were saying, He basically said to a gaggle of reporters, like, I never came up with the term you guys did. It's like, okay, not exactly an effective branding exercise.
Yeah. You mentioned Obamacare, and I've been thinking about that a lot because it's kind of a similar circumstance where
they embraced it afterwards, right?
Yeah, it was messy. It was hard to explain to the American people. Obama was having a really hard time messaging it and taking credit for it. They end up kind of like putting the brand together right at a time where it created a contrast for Republicans, right? They were trying to repeal it. It started to bring moderate Dems back on board. I liked Bidenomics for that reason a little bit. Like there's a lot of stuff that happened in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to explain on the stump. But if you kind of in the press, I'm stealing this a little bit from Dan Pfeiffer, who I think we both know well, but the press follows scandal in this town. They follow
scandals,
next.
Polls, money.
Right. They don't want to get into the merits of legislation, but
And
if
attacks,
you throw them
right.
some chum in the water,
Yes.
like a Bidenomics, now they're talking about it. Now they're paying attention, and Biden's got something he can go on the trail and start talking about. The big question for me is we're early. I don't see the moderate Dems, to your point, jumping on and being like, I'm for Bidenomics.
Yeah.
Like
there's going to be a lot of Senate candidates and a lot of candidates in swing districts around the country who, when they're attacked on being a devotee of Bidenomics, will have to draw a contrast with the president.
Yeah.
And it becomes a sort of broader messaging fight inside the party, I think.
Yeah.
That at least that potential is there.
Right. Well, I think it's also kind of an effort to string together some of these accomplishments that I think get lost a little bit in the issues of the day, be it like Hunter, be it like the mental competency things that just seem to be like bubbling over and over again. And I think it's an effort to say like, hey, do you guys remember, the infrastructure bill? Do you remember CHIPS Act? Do you remember IRA? And it's stringing all those things together and being like, over the course of 4 years, we've actually accomplished quite a bit.
I think that's right. But here's where I think it could have gone, and it would have been more effective to that goal. Look, having worked for a Republican candidate, Mitt Romney, who had a 59-point economic plan and a 59-point message, we lost to the Obama
How many
campaign.
of the points do you remember?
Yeah, everybody always jokes, what was 60 and why did it get left off, right? But having lost to the Obama campaign that had a 3-point economic plan and a 3-point economic message, that was a very effective one. And I don't think there's anything wrong with actually trying to replicate that in some form or fashion. And the message, I even remember it, mostly because it was used to defeat us in 2012. We need an economy that's built from the middle out. We need an economy that's built to last, and I'm on your side.
Yeah.
That built to last message at a time where we're going through a very tumultuous economic transition is probably the most important sort of fulcrum, I think, of any economic message right now. That is much more effective and speaks to many more people than Joe Biden, Bidenomics.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a better play for them to sort of that would have been a better frame for them to build their message and the party's message around. Because those candidates that are out in Senate battlegrounds and in congressional battlegrounds saying that they want an economy built to last and focused on the middle class, that's the message. That's the winning message. Republicans are going to try and run that message this year.
Right. Interesting you're not seeing that, because if you were to talk to Anita Dunn, I think she'd tell you that's the 3 points of Bidenomics, that it's middle out, built to last, and
that's why just the term Bidenomics for me is a little bit like nails on a chalkboard, and I think is ultimately could prove to be a distraction.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you think it'll prove to serve him well as a contrast? At some point, there will be a Republican nominee. They will need their economic agenda, as you just mentioned, where Romney, whether that be Trump or somebody else, is Biden getting a head start with Bidenomics, and maybe he needs to do better nailing these 3 points, but it's going to be this versus whatever, let's say.
Well, I think if he makes it about him, it becomes problematic. I think if he makes it about the economy and the stability, like if you think of the real value in the Biden brand, like who he is as a politician, it's this idea of a contrast that he can draw against Trump in the Trump years. So he's like stable, experienced, and I want to bring some level of a normalcy back to things. And I think at the heart of many people's economic worries is this idea that things are volatile and unstable, and they don't know where we're going in the future. There's a lack of certainty. So that's where the message has to be. But the second that you make it about Joe Biden with Bidenomics, that's where I think it loses its power. So Trump can actually use that against him. And you've seen House Republicans now, Kevin McCarthy saying Bidenomics is about higher gas prices. It's about greater inflation and more government. Yeah. Now, the more government thing is much harder given the populist streak, a much harder contrast to drive given the populist streak inside the Republican Party. Yeah. But for those other 2 points are really at the heart of what people worry about in today's economy.
Yeah, just on that last point, I think it's harder today a little bit to draw that contrast that it might have been, Kevin, under the Mitt Romney years, just because the tariffs, that started under Trump. You have folks like Rubio, folks like Tom Cotton that are a little more pro-labor, at least in their messaging, that are talking about industrial policy with folks like Warren Cass. There seems to be a little bit of a question around, is this a free market party? Is it not a free market party? And drawing that contrast to the Bidenomics industrial policy is a little bit more difficult. I mean, if you think about it, attacking Bidenomics is like, yes, government spending will cause inflation. Inflation is the number one issue for voters. Like, that's a pretty easy argument to make. But when your own side in the GOP is a little bit unclear on what the economic message is, how you feel about industrial policy, it makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I'd love your guys' thoughts on this, because one of the worries that I've had over the last few years about the Republican Party's economic message is that it seems to me that the debate over big government is sort of over. And many Republicans seem to be making a case, well, it's like, it's not about not having government intervention in economic policy. Instead, it's who gets the spoils of it, us or them. And we're seeing that used as a cudgel in an era where we have just such a heightened level of partisanship, where people don't see the other party as wrong. They see them as bad and to be fought.
Yes. Yeah, you've seen a huge shift in my mind where it's more about us versus them. But it's not on policies. I mean, I remember those
cultural
John Kerry days, the Romney campaigns. You had a contrast. To me, Romney really struggled because of how wealthy he was. If he was a poorer man, he might have been president. But Obama was able to frame him as this like elitist and a party that only cares on the top.
Yeah,
and
but also it's a 59-point plan versus the 3-point plan.
Also that too. But you're seeing a Republican Party, to Oliver's point, get very populist, focus very much on the middle, focus about threats like China, where, I mean, we just saw this with Silicon Valley Bank. You did not see a Republican Party standing up for big business on that front. You saw them kind of cracking down what happened, holding executives accountable on bonuses. So to Oliver's point, I worry about the contrast a little bit, because populist Biden, Trump aside, but a populist Republican GOP candidate, the message might start sounding a little bit the same.
Yeah, and then I wonder if it's really won over some of the cultural warpless stuff, right? Which is us versus them, and then that's where the issue of like our competition versus China as the dominant economic superpower. By the way, one of the contributors to the 59-point plan, Warren Cass, who you mentioned, who is now an author of Industrial Republican or what I guess they would say is conservative or right of center industrial policy.
Yeah, exactly. I was watching The West Wing recently, and in one of the later seasons, you've got the Alan Alda Republican candidate, and he's like has this full-throated defense of free trade and how it lowers prices. And the thing that stood out to me is like, man, I have not heard that in so long. Could you imagine any politician standing up there in front of voters talking about how free trade is great? Like, it's just not something you hear anymore. And, I imagine that there are Republicans on the Hill that have been there for 25 plus years that probably still believe that stuff in their heart of hearts, but you just don't hear it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, this is the shift I think we're seeing. And, whether Biden grabs some of that mantle or not, I think will be tough under this condition.
Well, it makes me tear my hair out, because it is both parties have contributed to a worse economic position for the country because of their lack of faith in Americans' trade policy. So.
Right. American trade policy, and then you're seeing parties beat
And
up
what was
on
interesting,
companies.
if you look back to the genesis of when both parties started to adopt the sort of anti-trade rhetoric, the 2016 election, and it was around the whole sort of TPA, TPP debate, which here at Penta, we were on the side of good, making the case for trade promotion authority, which helps strengthen Americans' ability to grow its economy. Those talking points come back very easy.
Yeah, they're good ones and they're true ones. So.
But the conventions at the time were in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And where was the other one? Well, let me put it this way. I remember one of the conventions being, yes, that's right. Yeah. Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, Cleveland.
And Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And everybody there were anti-trade protesters all around the conventions and on the convention floor in Philadelphia and Cleveland, Ohio, two of the largest trading ports in the country. Their entire economies of those cities is very dependent on trade. And here we have both parties battling out to see who can have the sharper anti-trade rhetoric.
Right. You've seen this.
I will
in,
never
like,
forget that.
Sherrod Brown.
Sorry,
like,
I just wanted to complain about that. Right?
Tough race. Yeah. I mean, it's, what's the matter with Kansas, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. Let me shift gears a little bit, Oliver. You mentioned something a minute ago. Right now, the economy is not polling well for Biden. We're recording this at a time where we might raise rates again by the Fed later today. But you do a lot of our work looking kind of down the field a little bit. Part of me sees this as a calculated risk from Biden that, okay, people don't feel great in July 2023. They're going to feel a lot better in October, November 2024, and I'm going to own it then. So Bidenomics is going to be a little bit of a weight around my ankles today, but it's going to be a boost for me then. Are we seeing anything in the data that backs that up?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are kind of two drop-offs. There's one drop-off between the economic reality, which is that we are still around record low unemployment. Right. Inflation is coming down. This is probably maybe the last rate hike. And so things are looking up. There's the drop off between that reality and voters' perceptions of that reality. So they don't perceive the economy as being as as being as strong as maybe the data indicates, although we're seeing that improving. So when we talked about the economic sentiment index in the beginning of the summer, we kind of saw this jump that has been sustained. So folks are feeling a little bit better. But then you see another drop off when it goes to credit to Biden, which is about only a third of voters say Biden's doing a good job on the economy. Even less than that say he's doing a good job on inflation. And inflation is, again, the number one issue at the moment for voters. And so I think, to your point, the question is, does that middle part, which is to say voter perceptions of the economy, does that improve, and does that drag Biden's approval of the economy with it by the time we get to about a year and change from now when the election actually happens? I think it's, the jury's out.
So the thing that matters most on this, look, one of the problems with presidential campaigns, or I think any campaign, is that so much is out of your control.
Yes.
The big macro things that are sort of driving economic sentiment and voter sentiment are really hard to have a direct impact on. And it takes 6 months to really sort of shift economic sentiment in the other direction. So if we're looking at the timeline for Biden, the 6 month thing, if it continues in the right direction, could help him at a crucial time. And that's the most important thing, is the trend line. Always watch the trend line on these. His economic ratings may be low right now and economic sentiment may be lower, but the trend line on things like unemployment and consumer confidence, like if those continue going in the right direction, along with job creation, even if it's slightly in the right direction, that matters a lot. I harken back to 2012. We thought we had Obama beat on the economy, right? But if you look at the course of 2012 from January all the way to November, the economic trend lines on all of these big indicators were all slightly ticking upwards all the way through the campaign. So, and that's what made it essentially a close but very comfortable win for an incumbent president. Yeah. The other thing too is the hard part about this thing for Biden is everything that Oliver said is right. The hard part is so much of his public approval is just tied to the fact that people think people have worries about his age. Yep. Yes. And that is not a partisan viewpoint, because anecdotally, if you talk to Democrats and then empirically, when you look at the data, they are very concerned about his age. Right. And that is where the one thing that is sort of burdening it remains a burden on his public approval trend line.
Yeah. Let me just quickly back that up. I was looking at some polling data from Harris Poll, just kind of preparing for this episode. We had 2/3 of folks that say Joe Biden is showing that he's too old to be president, versus 1/3 saying that he seems to be fit. So, I mean,
and the Democrat numbers on that
are also not great. I mean,
right. There's a lot of worry. There's a pitched worry, I think, inside his own party.
Yeah.
Is one of these heavier weighted in voters' mind, in your opinion, obviously, than the other? Like, if the economy is roaring next year, can Biden get the credit for it and put the concerns about his age aside?
A roaring economy will put some of that aside. I mean, ultimately, people's feeling about their hopes, dreams, and aspirations for the economy and their future are much more closely tied to how they vote than the age thing. Like a roaring economy will help.
Doing well personally.
Yeah, a roaring economy will make it what should not be a close, right? It shouldn't be a close election, but the age thing will make it a close election.
Yeah.
The other thing is between now and the election, a lot of these achievements on Biden's part are going to become tangible in the eyes of voters. I mean, some parts of Bidenomics, you think about chips, like does Sue in Missouri care that her processor is going to be made in Arizona and not Taiwan? No. But you have things like IRA and the rebates for things like refrigerators and smart devices that are more, climate efficient. Those are going to be activated in the later part of 2023. And then some of the infrastructure projects that, as always, take a little bit of time to start up. I think the White House said 35,000 infrastructure projects are approved coming out of BIF, and those are going to be, increasingly coming online too. So in the eyes of voters, they're going to be seeing a little bit more bang for their buck going towards the election.
And this is directly about your points, but directly backed up by the Morgan Stanley analyst report yesterday. That indicated that they were revising their economic forecast up to about 1.9% GDP growth, based on just the investment of dollars in things like infrastructure across the country. So.
Another point that I want, you mentioned something, so much of presidential campaigns are out of your control. And this is a good point on this.
And if you watch cable news, you think every minute matters, and it really doesn't.
It really doesn't. But timing is such an important factor. And, even as a Biden, voter myself, he came into office and inherited a huge jobs boom, right? That was the comeback from COVID, and those are tremendous numbers. He could be in a point, to your point, Oliver, next summer where all these things are hitting and voters are starting to get a sense of it. I think if the election were this November, no chance, right? None of that stuff is sunk in yet.
Yeah.
But he's got a year to both go around with shovels in the ground and cut ribbons to factories being open.
No, the key to Biden's prospects in 2024 are the trend line on economic sentiment, and then having a contrast with potentially Donald Trump, where Donald Trump is talking about nothing but 2020 election and relitigation of that, while Joe Biden, very much up in years, it will be what by election day? 81?
Yes.
Okay, 81 on election day, being the candidate of talking about the economic future.
Right.
And with optimism and positivity and a plan.
Yeah.
That is what will eventually be the perfect ingredients for a Biden reelection.
You could very much see a campaign, right, where Trump is on TV all day long, but he's talking about January 6th and the government that's out to get him and his indictments.
Right.
And once every 2 days, Biden's at a rally at some factory.
Right. Now, the flip side is that the economy still continues either to plateau or potentially starts to teeter in the wrong direction.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
And Biden forced to be out on the campaign trail in 2024, unlike how he had to be out in 2020 during COVID, constantly exposed to the elements, and the age thing is reinforced every single day. And Trump somehow finds a way to talk about the economy and how we're going to beat China and how we're going to, gas prices weren't this high and inflation wasn't this high when I was president. And that becomes a very close election in Trump's favor. So.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We've sort of assumed most of this conversation. That
some of this depends on him having to have an out-of-body, Trump having an out-of-body experience and changing his personality to become policy-focused and optimistic.
Yeah, but. I'm not holding my breath. But on the economic side of it, we've been sort of assuming in this conversation we nailed the soft landing, that the recession either never comes or we barely notice it. But there's a very real possibility we're in a first quarter or second quarter recession that's big enough where voters feel that. Yeah. And now back to our kind of beginning of this conversation, the branding. Now Bidenomics is the Q2, Q3 recession that everybody's
now it's an albatross around the Biden White House and the Biden campaign messaging and congressional Democrats.
And that's a hard pivot to then shake it off and say, actually, this is my vision for the future, not just my record.
I was just going to say, I mean, it is looking good, and the question is just what else would you hitch your wagon to at this point? All the economic indicators are as good as they're going to be in terms of inflation and everything else. The economy is always kind of the number one issue for voters. And then like otherwise the record, I mean, foreign policy, do Americans feel safer today than they did 4 years ago? I mean, I haven't seen any data on it recently, to be honest, but I almost don't think so. And it's kind of the question of like, you know, this is your one wagon you can kind of hitch your ride to.
Yeah, it's you control as much as you possibly can. And I think your message around the economy and voter sentiment has to be fundamentally center to your strategy. The thing that's always difficult to tell campaigns is that so much is out of their control.
Right.
And then the other thing is every single election cycle has a major event that scrambles both your messaging strategy as well as the policy matrix that you were going to argue. So, you know, with conflict around the globe right now, possibly a very heavy storm season coming up next year when we're heading into the fall, right? When hurricane season hits, and you know, how does that all scramble how does that scramble sort of the campaign dynamics?
Right. And anyone who sits here in July 23
can
tells you what it is.
I know.
Full of it. So we won't try. Maybe let me wrap up. So this campaign season is going to kick off in earnest in a couple weeks. First Republican debate. What are you guys expecting to see, but both on Bidenomics and maybe just generally? I assume they tee off on it, or do they kind of concentrate on each other?
Well, this GOP field has had a proclivity for avoiding conflict with the front runner, Donald Trump, and in
just
favor
pretend
of
he's not there.
and you can see it. I can literally picture the consultant campaign teams sitting around with their candidate and going, "Look, the number one way to sort of get attention and generate enthusiasm for your candidacy is to hit Joe Biden as hard as possible and make a name for yourself as the best candidate to go up against Biden in a general election. So avoid this 800-pound
gorilla,
in the room, and focus on Joe Biden, right? And so I think that's what they're all going to do. I do expect some of them will start to hit each other, which is sort of a 2016 redux, right? Which is they're all going to start taking each other out, and Donald Trump just stands on the curb and claps as that parade goes by.
Yeah. I'm curious that you said they'll focus on Biden, and you've been in a lot more candidate rooms than I have, but I'm still imagining a very cultural focused debate.
I agree.
Like they go after the Anheuser-Busch's, the Targets, like that GOP field seems to be very focused on woke and their way to differentiate.
You're exactly right. I think one of the ways to make a name for yourself is also to demonstrate that you are the person to take on the fight against the excesses of the perceived excesses of the radical left.
The way the world's changing on you, the way everyone's telling you what to do.
Right.
I don't think the issues are like going to be I don't think necessarily the issues are top of mind for the base either. I think they want it's kind of like this vision of American decline and what are you going to do about it, and like fighting against the mob and all this kind of stuff. Brian, to your point, do we know if Trump is going to be participating?
Still,
we probably won't know up until the last second. And that's the amazing thing about Trump. Like when I worked on campaigns, I mean, the amount of time that you spent preparing for debates, everything from like your travel for all of the staff to your plan for sort of managing the spin room and managing getting surrogates there. So that took up so much time and effort. Trump is just he sort of hovers above the political systems of the past, and that he could just drop in like that day and we all know he doesn't prepare. He wings it on everything.
Right.
And totally block out the sun on all of these other candidates for one day. We don't know what's going to happen, but I would expect that he does not participate, and that sort of doesn't give anybody the platform and the audience that they really crave, right? Which is they all want to take a shot. Like,
ratings will go down.
Some of them want to take a shot at Trump, like Christie, just for Christie's sake. And they all want the base's eyeballs on them. So I think he's going to deny them that.
Yeah.
Deny them the oxygen that they want.
I do too. I think he's playing his own game, and there's no other field.
Yeah. But I mean, Brian, to your earlier point, if we're expecting a nuanced debate on the policies of Bidenomics and the specifics, I don't think that's what
won't happen with Trump there. I don't think that.
No.
So Scott, some of these other guys, I think maybe. That's a good point. Let's leave it there. Obviously, we could go a while on this topic, but we'll be doing a lot of coverage around the 2024 election, what it means for our clients and businesses and the stakeholders you care about. So we'll certainly have Oliver and Kevin back on the show soon. But thank you, both of you guys, for joining us this week.
Thanks, Bryan.
Great to be here.
And to all our listeners, remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter @PentaGRP. I'm your host, Bryan DeAngelis. And as always, thanks for listening.